sought to understand my newfound urges. And most of all, I watched the moon and listened to the sudden summer rain.
I stopped reading. I was about a third the way through. I flipped through a little and saw there was some drawings, some scribbles, unusual for a novel of this time. Early 18th century, perhaps, translated into English, or perhaps the woman, the person, the immortal narrator, was excommunicated from England and went to France, the cathedral city where Joan of Arc was burned. I think I'd only passed by, perhaps. What did it have to do with Simon's grandfather, with the invention of the Red Umbrella Society? A book passed down, an umbrella fashioned as a weapon to kill the very person who both yearned and did not yearn for the use of one, whose protection would inhibit the enjoyment of the summer rain. Creating new archetypes, that's what Simon said to me once. It sounded like nonsense, although I vaguely knew what he meant. Personal archetypes, community archetypes, the power of images, of imagos. No, wait, that's not right. Psychology was never my strong suit, neither was it for the RUS, it would seem. But perhaps they did not want to kill this person. Perhaps they were charmed as I was by reading it. Ah well. I put it down on my nightstand. I took off my shoes, my socks, all but my birthday suit, and climbed into the soft linen. Unusual for me to decide to sleep in the bed right away, regardless of how soft it would be. I fell asleep, and at exactly midnight, I'd forgotten it did this. The blinds came down, waking me with their electric whir. Then I went back to sleep, entombed in soft, near-complete darkness. The boy and I were sitting on a pier. The waves were crashing beneath our feet, caressing them. I was perhaps a bit older than he, yes. We wore modern bathing suits, and I was surprised when he took my hand. The tenderness was unfamiliar, and then he told me,
"Don't let go. Only for a second to tell the future of sorts."
He dug his finger into my palm until it pierced. I felt my skin burst, the blood rise, the waves still crashing against my ankles, reassuring. I looked out towards the inland beach. Harry, I think, was there, suntanning. A wolf-like dog sat next to him. The blood pooled on my palm. I forgot the pain. It looked more like paint.
"How do you read a vampire's lifeline?"
The boy asked. Above us, storm clouds were gathering. "Should go inside soon, yes?"
"Not yet. Almost there. See? It's finding its shape."
Indeed, as I looked at my hand, the liquid formed into a circle, a little vibrating ring that spun and spun.
"They part it here, and here, and here."
The boy drew lines in a circle. "So it goes." "Yes, and..." I looked over at Harry, and the wolf looked like it was going to attack him, but Harry disregarded the wolf and came into the water, started swimming towards us.
"I see now. I see. You rescue her, you rescue him. That's the only way. You close this part of the circle. That allows for an exit here. Only through the most almighty forgiveness."
Then it was evident that we were not on the pier, but the back of a creature. I did not know where Harry had gone, and it sent me into a panic. The boy climbed the scaled length of the pier of the dragon's neck and leapt until he caught the horns of the dragon. And I held for dear life, the image on my palm blurring as I gripped the scales of the dragon as we rose up, up, up into the sky. Until I woke, I ripped off the covers in a sweat again. I did not know how Simon could live in a place so warm. It had felt nice when I fell asleep. I climbed into a cold shower and collected the fragments of my dream as I shivered. Simon had included a soft white bathrobe for me, and I slipped it on. It reminded me for a moment chillingly of the Ancient One, of his little pink slippers. What was I to make of that? What were we to make of the piles of bones deep below? "There is always work to do," said the voices. "Let's have breakfast." Simon was having cereal, the ones with little marshmallows in them. He nodded hello. He wore tartan boxer shorts and a t-shirt of something called Modest Mouse. It was the image of a montgolfier, a hot air balloon, and the words will all float on. He pointed to the coffee pots, and I poured myself some and refilled his.
Did you... did you read it?
Yes, yeah, but I'm not done. Perhaps you would like to start it.
Nah, not yet. I need to get some sleep first. Mind is all jumbled to read.
You did not,
Nah, I didn't sleep last night. Hung with friends, met someone. I'm trying to think if I should tell Celia not to come. Never mind. None of your troubles. So, the book.
I see. Yes, it is a novel, I guess, or an autobiography if one were to assume as much, but that it is about one such as us, a vampire, a woman, although I do not know, perhaps of both or no sex. I do not know how your generation says it.
Okay. Is it good?
Yes, I think you will enjoy it. I did not feel right to take the book out with me. I left it on a small table in the library should Simon be ready, along with the tale of Barnacle Harry, which I'm sure I'd enjoy. I heard Simon turn on the apartment speakers to the max as I descended in the elevator for my outing. As I arrived at the lobby, certain parts of my dream came into clearer focus, though the usefulness of dreams was always suspect. It was like translating poetry into prose, one word out of place, and it lost the thread. I did not bring an umbrella, but there didn't seem much chance of rain, not anything severe anyway. I tried to empty my brain as I ambled into Central Park. I did not have much desire to draw or to paint. I did not have much desire to think about Lucy or Dracunin. Those fantasies were exhausting to me at the moment. It anguished me for a moment as the long muddled thought of how Agatha had come back to us through the bunny made me feel like her return would be impossible. The technology that Simon had, it had manifest my art powers, but also Harry was there, struggling of course, and the art, long ago created, baked in an inferno. Presumably like Agatha had, though she had not. The blue flames of Bunny, the blue flames of the cathedral, the wooden Jesus in the museum struggling with his arms at his side like Harry. It was all giving me a headache. Was this all some kind of math? I stopped to sit on a bench, breathed out, look at a group of youngsters having a picnic. Too many variables, and all I could control was myself. How much forgiveness did I have left? Where was Baba? What did I care where she was? What was there to forgive? What narcissism? What if it had nothing to do with me? Perhaps it had been Simon who manifested Agatha's return, or Harry, or the wooden Jesus. The voices were silent. So oddly was Central Park relative, that is, to the cacophony of the city. I laid back in the grass, closed my eyes. I could feel her, there high above the clouds, just above the highest silver thorn in New York's hide. I could hear its wings flap. Now I was above her now, looking down. She rode it like she could fall from either side at any point. The eyes, the dragon's eyes, they were clouded like the sky. Or was it hers? I saw the lightning strike as the elevator breached into the night sky. Then thunder, then a timid rain, then an aggressive one. I was not prepared for what I saw when the doors opened. Entrance library was severed in two. One of the bookcases toppled over with part of the wall, the lighting dangling, wires sparking on one side. I looked around, but the book was not there.
Simon!
He's gone,
said a voice, British. The lights in the kitchen were malfunctioning. I could barely make his shape out. I saw the fountain behind him overflowing worriedly.
Hello, Leto.
Hello. Parker, I presume.
Yes. Sorry that this is the way we meet. And I'm sorry that I was too late. Too late to warn you. And him.
I walked past him, almost slipping on the wet marble floor, through to Simon's room, upended by a hole from without his wall, straight through, and painted a black star on Simon's wall above his bed frame. As I opened the door of my guest room, the wind and the rain flattened me against the wall. The book was gone. My bunny backpack lay under my bed, as if it'd been kicked there. Inside it lay the tale of Barnacle Harry.
Come,
said Parker. I took my things and closed the door, regretfully. When?
Just a moment ago. 20 minutes, maybe. Happened in a flash. Made my way up. They were both gone.
They who? Where is Simon? Is he alive?
Small chance he isn't, or we'd find his body here. Or there would be some sign below. There's that, at least. I think he's wanted alive. I just didn't see them coming until it was too late.
Wanted alive? By whom, exactly?
Come, I have a plane waiting. I'll explain on the way there.
On the lift, I took my chemise out of my bag to wipe my face, my hair as I was drenched. I thought of the dragon, my imagining of it. How not unlike something that had flown in, presumably to snatch Simon, though seemingly not without a fight. I was unnecessarily startled as I nearly sat on an umbrella in the back seat of the town car. It was decidedly red, very well constructed, a thick handle and heft. I could tell even from moving it to the side to sit. It took me a moment to recall how the one I'd used to kill Gree was identical. I looked at Parker. They were of indeterminate age, perhaps 50, 60, perhaps more. Round-faced, wearing rounded spectacles. Although their face gave them a portly shopkeep demeanor, I could see that they were rather fit despite their diminutive size. They were balding slightly, grayish, red-brown hair, although it was hard to have seen in the flickering light of the apartment, and I had ridden the elevator down in a daze in silence without looking at them. In the light of the town car, it was easier but still dim. He didn't seem to blink as he looked at me.
All right?
Yes? And you?
Yes, I suppose. Feeling a little guilty, I guess. But I won't blame myself long.
Guilty?
Not for any good reason. Just should have seen it coming. I was preoccupied with other things. Did you happen to see any of it coming? See anyone follow you? Anything like that?
No, nothing that I can remember. For some reason, I thought of the movers moving that coffin-like box next to where we had lunch, but it didn't seem to be anything likely that was worth sharing to anyone. He went with friends 2 nights in a row, did not bring them back to the apartment, perhaps out of respect for me. I do remember him saying he met someone last night, something romantic, something about reconsidering a present relationship. Anyway, maybe not relevant.
Maybe, maybe not so. I have to thank you, by the way. I'm sure you'll receive it poorly, but, and I am not fond of this word, you avenged my brother. He deserved some things, but he did not deserve that end.
I did not indeed like to be thanked for this, but I understood his grief. I had not done it to avenge his brother, but perhaps the body had spurred me on to take the action that I did. Perhaps I had empathized with him more than I could remember. Perhaps his semblance to his brother, a similar tweed jacket, had reminded me of being a twin, of the pain a twin would feel at losing. A twin had... I don't know. Parker looked away. What, was his name?
Oh, my brother. I called my brother... We all called my brother Crow. His birth name is Heathrow. People always called me Parker, but that's our family name, you see. Or one of them. I don't like to share my first name. I go by Park or Parker. You prefer Netto or Nettovicious?
Netto probably, if you like. You must know that I had a twin.
Yes, though not until rather recently. Well, you can understand then. Me and my brother are alike as 2 bodies, 1 soul. That old thing. Up until we were teenagers. And then, a slow drift. Unconscious, of course. The difference between us, innate. And finally our paths diverted, until it was too late. Perhaps he was the only thing that kept me. Kept me in the RUS, mostly as a charade. At first I tell myself it was to save him somehow, but eventually it was for my own egoistic plans. My slow-moving, vastly inept plans, as it were.
And you did not take to the RUS?
Yes, well, I was lucky, in a way. Simon's grandfather, he favored my brother. I had some speaking difficulties early on, tried to cure me of them with my parents' permission. It worked, until it didn't. And so he didn't like having me around, reminded himself that he was a fraud. The cult leader's first victim is themselves, as they say. My brother feigned the confidence that I might have had more of in secret. Perhaps on my behalf, to save the dishonor of my family. It's all very confused, I won't bore you. And so, he took him under his wing. A great honor. I managed to go to college, and like my brother, studied psychology in secret. Parents did not achieve the immortality they were promised. Died rather ironically young. The dowser, that's what we'd call the leader, Simon's grandfather early on. Water divination, you know. It barely makes sense. Otherwise, Dr. D, then the summoner. It was rather tiring, all these renamings. Punishments, if you got it wrong. I couldn't risk moving freely before he passed, you see. That's why I'm perhaps not further along as I'd like.
Further along with... Your plan is to what? Be a kind of facilitator for this collective of ours, Mr. Parker? Leona spoke to me.
Did she? Good. She can be so inscrutable. Sometimes I'm not entirely sure what she thinks of me.
Parker looked out at the highway we were getting on. I wondered who our driver was, though there was a partition, and perhaps they could not hear us.
Took me a while, but I understand your common strength and your common weakness. That's all. I'll deliver it plainly.
I had been fondling the umbrella's handle unconsciously. It startled me that I'd been doing so, though it hadn't seemed to bother Parker.
Your immortality is linked to the core trauma of your origin, and none that I have met seem to have a history predating that origin that is nothing short than rooted in, as we say, complex trauma. Ulcus was perhaps an exception, it would seem, but, well, perhaps the exception that proves the rule.
I nodded. Yes, we're all doing our best, and?
Well, that's just it. With apologies, it is your best, and the decisions you can make, collectively, the strength you can manifest as a group to combat what seems to be a great force of darkness, once dormant, now recently awake. Though I do realize it's complicated, all of these decisions are at a fault by being motivated by minds that are not exempt enough from the influence of that trauma. Our adversaries, for I will consider them adversarial to myself as well, they killed my brother after all, their advantage is that they are not hindered by their trauma, but simply motivated by it. Their chess moves are quite simply more direct, and therefore more advanced, while you're playing two games, the one against them, the other against yourselves. I simply offer myself as an intermediary, an advisor to discriminate between which fight you should be fighting at the moment, the one internal, psychic, equally important, the other, material, actual, and far more dangerous. Well, to the mortal world, that is. I do concede that your first struggle, your inner battle, may also be equally important, or at least it would be to an immortal soul. That is something I'm still learning to understand. I'm not saying I'm some kind of genius, that is, only I do know the RUS. I have some privileged information. The boy, Simon, was brought up, raised much as I was, but may be a little blinded. And of course his powers are regrettably mixed up in all of it, it would seem.
Were you at the compound, the place where...
No, I'm afraid not. Wouldn't have been allowed, I'm sure. Inner circle shit. My brother was, and I did facilitate getting Lucy in there. Indirectly, that did elevate my brother's position as well, which led to his demise, I think. It was a bit of a literal mess, I heard. Oh, glad everyone survived. You should have seen how much they had to cover up. Excavate the technology.
Excavate? Ooh. The car took a sharp turn as if they were in evasion onto an off-ramp.
Ooh, sorry,
said Parker, steadying himself easily as I lurched. I was fortunate to not have left my passport, my identity cards. Harry had no doubt procured them at great expense. However, once through security, we arrived at the terminal with stairs that descended onto the runway. A private plane was waiting for us. To my surprise, if I was not mistaken, the Peruvian woman from the helicopter was waiting at the foot of the passenger stairs. She gave me a little salute and a smile. It was just us on the plane. My heart lurched as for a moment I could almost feel the presence of my blue bunny, of Agatha, of she who was both my sister and my fondest yearning for a pet at my side. sitting at the seat beside me, looking anxiously out the window. I reached into my bunny backpack and retrieved the Tale of Barnacle Harry, opened up the front cover. El Drake, it read.
Can I see?
Asked Parker. I handed him the book.
Ah, of course. An original. Lucky you. I have a copy. Studied it enormously, but only recently, you know. It was hidden from the rest. Counteracts the less evenly balanced recountings of Sir Harry's nastier exploits. Even myself, I must admit I've been rather terrified of being near him, having grown up with the more gruesome tales, whether they're true or not. I built up my courage, and after I saw you two, I saw him leaving Simon's concert and was going to say a proper hello. But then he disappeared, quite astonishingly on me. Drink?
Parker got up and reached into a little fridge. He got out a beer, opened it with his buckle, which I just now noticed had 2 teeth on it, like from a vampire, but not quite sharp. He offered another to me, but I declined. I quite selfishly was exhausted by recent events, perhaps a little too unconcerned with Simon's safety, which made me feel shame, but I was feeling irritated that we were off on another adventure. Before I could settle my thoughts, it was making me dance between mania and depression.
Well...
Parker sipped his beer. He was either extraordinarily calm or extraordinarily good at hiding the fact that he was not. I was going to ask where we were going, but before I could, he said, unprompted,
John 1 says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God."
He sipped from his beer. Once upon a time, I may have welcomed the biblical debate. I'd heard enough of them in my times in monasteries, but he smiled at me, a kind of apology at his non sequitur, I think.
I've always been fascinated by the different ways words and images influence our kind. Your kind. Our different kinds. You know? Human kind.
Another sip.
And perhaps in time, I realized that it wasn't so much my own decision that this had been imparted to me by the RUS's influence. The tale of Barnacle Harry there, written by one of Simon's ancestors. The first of the Seekers. The words that launched and sank a dozen ships at least. Metaphorical ships as well. Seeking different things, of course, muddled by generations. Some approaching their seeking with love, with a thirst for understanding. Others for a source of power, everlasting, almighty, of course. In any case, words, painfully subjective and Machiavellian in their intent. The words that shape our reality. They are one origin of the RUS. And of course, of so much more. But also there are images, and I do believe in the primacy of images. Perhaps also of their honesty, if you follow. Or perhaps there is nothing in actuality more honest. But they are a balance to words, an antidote to their inevitable overreach. Am I rambling? I haven't slept much.
Parker got up and fetched another beer from the fridge. He offered me one again, then got out a ginger beer, popped it open unprompted along with his beer and put it in my hand. He paused again, looking out the porthole. I decided to taste it. It sparkled and burned my tongue pleasantly. I worried about Simon's finals, sad to think he might not graduate. How nice and normalizing it would be for him to satisfy some human craving. I thought back to our time driving through that college in Vermont and the sadness in his voice. Parker looked at me curiously as if he was trying to read if I was judging him, perhaps giving me room to respond.
It's funny. You're the first person in a long time I've spoken so freely to. I'd rather develop this bullshit persona of mystery, of thoughtful, chest-like mastery. I say this embarrassingly, but perhaps it's what was required of me at first. And now, with a little breathing room, so to speak, I'm finding it easier to just be myself.
Well, that is good. Perhaps that is something I do not identify with as much. I have never been much for assuming any kind of persona. I both hate myself and hate more the idea of trying to be something else than myself. Hate is a strong word, of course. I sipped my ginger beer, tried to relax a little.
That's a nice quality. A fine quality. Knowledge of self. That's perhaps something we who have been brought up in these cult-like surroundings lack the most. There is such a practiced alienation from even the possibility of trusting our own instincts. Such a fundamentalism, systems upon systems, of knowing not only ourselves, but the wider human animal, that we lose track of what it is to be an individual and ultimately of the unknowability of not only humankind, but the universe, you know? I still struggle with it, of course, but pictures help. Did you enjoy your gallery showing?
I blushed. Yes, I am grateful.
Not at all. It was I who was grateful. I was owed a favor. I'm just glad you made it in time.
The art is...
secure. Happy to get whatever Harry had back to him, of course, but perhaps for a time, it would be best to leave it alone. There's enough magic going around these days, and your art has more magic than any of us can properly predict.
That is kind, thank you. And if you mean it literally, I suppose that is true as well. I am unfortunately not able to predict my magic, much less even than poor Simon. I noticed a ring on Parker's pinky finger. It was a snake biting its tail. He noticed me noticing it, shifted around. The eye of the snake had a little ruby in it.
Well, I keep certain tokens of my heritage. This was my father's. It never fit Crow, so he gave it to me. My father was a slender man. Somehow we both got our mother's corpulence. Fat fingers, you know.
I looked out the portal a little to rest the conversation a bit. We were clearly going eastward, although perhaps southward. I really couldn't tell, but I was trying to tap into my intuition, and navigation was one way that I did that sometimes. I could not see any stars outside, but the ocean below, it called to me like a somnolent spirit. I did not feel uncomfortable in Parker's presence, but now that we'd met, his character felt different than Leona had presented to me. I did not like his sudden shift in persona, whether he owned up to it or not. What if it had been him who I'd seen killed and he was Crow? No, I am simply being paranoid.
Well, it'll be a while,
said Parker. He got out a sleep mask from a little pouch next to his seat, kicked his chair back and seemed to go, directly to sleep. I did not know whether I should feel irritated that he had not answered many or any of my questions. Perhaps I was irritated that he knew somehow my personality that would not wake the man, that I am too painfully shy, unwilling to appear brusque or irrational. Perhaps that I tend to go with the flow a little too much. Doubtful he knew this, of course, but I was just processing my irritation. I could go to the pilot and ask her where we were going, but it hardly seemed to matter at this point. My sleep powers were manifest in the compound because I had discovered something new maybe about myself. It also may have been Bunny's influence. In short, it wasn't up to me. Give up, said the voices, not so much as a command but as a reminder. And before I knew it, I was sleeping as well. At least I think I was. Parker was still there across from me sleeping. Only no, the snake on his finger had come alive and had uncoiled itself, was crawling, growing, until it got to his neck, encircling it. I saw his neck throb in resistance, much like I'd seen Harry's in the compound. It was difficult to tell Parker's face, but his body seemed the same. Tweed jacket, common blue shirt.
It's okay to let him die,
said the boy. He was sitting across the aisle from us, his legs pulled up and crossed. He was wearing a dark robe, not unlike I'd seen in monasteries of past. A rope belt around him that he was idling his fingers with. I am not aware that I have the power to save him.
In the dream is what I meant.
Who are you? The boy pointed out the porthole. I looked out. Long dragon's wings were beating on both sides, and yet we're still inside the cabin of an airplane.
If you refuse them their destiny, you must give them another home. Children need a home. I needed a home, a real one.
Who are you? I repeated.
If you don't want my help, I won't come back,
said the boy angrily. Then I was crying in my dream, Or at least I could feel tears down my face, and I realized then my feet were submerged in water, water that was rising. I looked out the porthole and noticed we had landed in the ocean water, black and brackish and thick and fearfully uncomfortable. I looked at Parker. The snake had strangled him by the neck and his body went limp as he slid into the water feet first like a rag doll. I could have grabbed him, but I did not. That filled me with regret. The boy had already started to have an influence on me. Why did I trust him? Why did I listen to a dream child? His innocence, his purity of vision was suspect in this place. The water was at my waist. I looked at the boy. He was hopping up, pressing the top of the airplane cabin to make me notice. It was like the inside of the dragon's belly.
He has to drink. He's a water dragon. Was originally. We're all water dragons originally, Netto. Stand on the chair if you're afraid of water.
I kicked my feet up and knelt on the chair. I remember the time in the compound. There in my dream, I remembered another dream. My dreamscape, the shark, Lucy, Dracunin. The names made the boy shake his head. Then, he was gone. I was alone in the dark, the water rising. I looked down deep below. I saw the floating body of Parker and the water snake, circling, rising. And down below that, the image of a man that looked like Harry, but not. And I felt myself sinking down towards them and awoke. The plane was rising, no, descending. I looked at Parker, who was still sleeping with his mask, but seemed to be stirring. I looked out the porthole, uncertain that I wouldn't see a dragon's wing. The brushstroke of sunrise, red and ravishing, both calmed and invigorated me. It looked like flames. Then I thought Parker was sleep-talking, but it seemed too cogent, although his speech was a little slurred, perhaps from being asleep.
The thing about trauma,
He said,
is that we can handle quite a lot of it. The thing that breaks us is not necessarily the first blow, nor is it the worst blow. Sometimes it's just a glancing blow, one that catches us off guard, perhaps even by its casual cruelty, and catches us unawares. So your family left, I take it, but your sister did not. Twins. Both vampires. Unusual. I can't help being fascinated, being one myself. But perhaps it wasn't your family leaving you, that original hurt. Perhaps it wasn't the bite, the urge, as they say, the worst hurt, so I've heard. Perhaps it was something else.
This was an odd kind of psychoanalysis. Parker, without taking off his sleep mask, grasped for his beer bottle on the little table and brought it to his lips, finished it off. I could tell it tasted warm by his subtle grimace.
Well, anyway, we'll be landing soonish, I should imagine. I always try to sleep as much as I can on the flight. Helps my jet lag, regardless, somehow. For he who does not know death, life is cruelty enough.
Said Parker. I said.
It's one of the old Dowser's proverbs. Number 72, the 72nd taste. Rather insipid, but it's one of the ones that sticks in my craw, as it were. The OD. I'd forgotten we'd called him that for a while. The original Dowser. But I'd laugh that we were calling him old. Not funny, really, but you needed a laugh in that organization. Believe me.
I believed him. It seemed one needed a drink, too. I wasn't too sure Harry wouldn't be irritated by this man. Perhaps he was irritating me a little, too, at this point.
Tell me, do you ever have times where you don't dream?
For a moment, I didn't know if I should tell him. But then I took the leap. Yes. Why do you ask?
I'm not sure.
He said quite pensively and then seemed to fall back asleep. The city we were landing in stretched as far as the eye could see with lights. It was daybreak, but the lights were there too, like little flames beckoning for the godly one. It pierced my heart that all these little lights represented one or more persons, that they, like me, had felt a pure loneliness at some point, and that loneliness was a pure light calling that there were some who would gather that life force and use it for their own gains. As we made our descent into the still nameless place, I went into the plain lavatory to freshen up a little, splash water on my face. Then, before I anticipated we appeared to be landing, I tried to open the door, but it was stuck. It would not open. So I sat back down on the toilet and held the little railing as the plane made landfall. Then, sirens. The distinct sound of voices in the language I could not understand. I tried the door again, but it would not budge. I heard Parker, I think, saying something to the pilot. The sound of the door opening, possibly. Then more distinct voices. I gripped my bunny backpack that for some reason I'd brought into the bathroom. I remembered that Parker had left his umbrella in the car on the way. Perhaps he had more than one. What to do? Possibly age myself, assume the identity of a very old man, pretend to have had a cardiac arrest, be taken to a hospital, but then I heard a knock and a voice.
Sir? Hi. You're safe. Can you open the door?
I hesitated to answer. Finally, I thought it best to. I would, but I think the door is stuck.
I know this plane. If you pull the handle towards you hard, I think, then try the lock rather hard, you get stuck. I think I've been stuck in the very same plane once.
Okay, I will try, but perhaps you can tell me what's going on, where everyone is?
You're safe and sound. No one is getting hurt. Simple seizure of assets. Everything is perfectly legal. Well, the protection of the Taipei police. Why don't you tell me your name, and I'll tell you mine. And we'll go from there. Although I suspect I might know yours. Mr. Netto.
Vicious.
Chang. My name is Chang. You've had a very long flight. Welcome to Taiwan.
Check 1, 2.
Check 1, 2. That was the 6th season of the diaries titled The Seventh Son. Thanks to the BAI at Brown University for allowing me their space to record, as well as funding 4 of their MFA Trinity Rep students, Evelyn Dumont, Jesse March, Daniel Stivelberg, and Abram Blau. Special thanks as well to the other actors featured, Sherry Rowe, Laura Colella, Aaron Jungles, and David Weitz. Very grateful that Parker was played by Damien Gerard, and teasing Stephen Chang, who will be here for the next season. Always so appreciate all the artists who contributed their art this season. Straubs, Seraph, Apollyon, Nix, Shayna, Jen, Cayde, and Celine. All their links can be found in the show notes and their art on Spotify for video and YouTube. Finally, if you're interested in contributing art, please write to o4afilms@gmail.com. We sometimes have funds available, but we always try to reward artists with a gift of some kind. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for the 7th season called The Dreams in Which I'm Dying. Oh, and thank you, Cosmo.